Upon that night, when fairies light on Cassillis Downan's dance, or o'er the waves in splendid blaze on sprightly horses prance, or for Culzean the route is taken beneath the moon's pale beams, there up the cove to stray and rove among the rocks and streams, to sport that night. Among the bonny winding banks where Doon runs rippling clear, where Bruce once ruled the martial ranks and shook his Carrick spear, some merry friendly country folks together did convene, to burn their nuts and pull their stocks and have their Halloween, full of cheer that night. The lasses fleet and cleanly neat, more fair than when reclined, their faces glow, full sweetly show hearts faithful, warm and kind. The lads so quick with true love knots well knotted on their garters, some oddly shy and some with gabs get lasses' hearts a-startin', oft fast at night. Then first and foremost through the kail their stocks must now be sought hence. They shut their eyes and grope and choose for hefty ones and straight ones. Poor foolish Will fell off the drift and wandered through the bow kail, and pulled, for want of better shift, a stem much like a sow-tail, so bent that night. Then straight or crooked, earth or none, they roar and cry throughout there, the very wee things toddling run, with stalks out o'er their shoulders. And if the kail stalks sweet or sour, with pocket knives they taste them, then cosily above the door with knowing care they've placed them, to lie that night. The lasses steal away from all to pull their stalks of corn, but Rob slips out and darts about behind the massive thorn. He grappled Nelly hard and fast, loud shrieked all the lasses, but the grain at the top of her stalk was lost when cuddlin' in the false house with him that night. The old goodwife's well-hoarded nuts are round and round divided, and many lads' and lasses' fates are there that night decided. Some kindle cosy side by side and burn together trimly, some start away with saucy pride and jump out o'er the chimney, full high that night. Jean slips in too with watchful eye, who it was she wouldn't tell, but this is Jock and this is me, she says in to herself. He blazed o'er her and she o'er him as they would never more part, till fuff he started up the flue and Jean had won a sore heart to see it that night. Poor Willie, with his bow kail stock, was burnt with stuffy Mally, and Mally no doubt had a sulk to be compared to Willie. Mal's nut leapt out with prideful fling, and her own fit it burnt it, while Willie laughed and swore by Jing 'twas just the way he wanted to be that night. Nell had the false house in her mind, she puts herself and Rob in loving blaze they sweetly join till white in ash they're sobbin'. Nell's heart was dancing at the view, she whispered Rob to look for it. Rob slyly kissed her bonny mouth full cosy in the nook for it, unseen that night. But Marin sat behind their backs, her thoughts on Andrew Bell. She leaves them gashin' at their cracks and slips out by herself. She through the yard the nearest takes, and for the kiln she goes then, and darkly fumbles for the pipe, and in the blue yarn throws then, right feared that night. And yes, she'd wind, and yes, she'd dart, I say, she wasn't slacking, till something held within the heart, good Lord, but she was quaking. But whether it was the devil himself, or whether it was a pipe end, or whether it was Andrew Bell, she did not stay for talkin' to ask that night. Wee Jenny to her granny says, "Will you go with me, granny? I'll eat the apple at the glass I got from Uncle Johnny." She fuffed her pipe with such a light, in wrath she was so vaprin', she didn't see a cinder burnt her brand-new worsted apron, out through that night. "You little skelpie-limmer's face, I dare you try such sportin', as seek the foul thief any place for him to spy your fortune. No doubt but you may get a sight, great cause you have to fear it, for many a one has gotten a fright, and lived and died delirious on such a night. One harvest before the Shera Moor, last night it could have been. I was a young girl then, I'm sure, I wasn't past 15. The summer had been cold and wet, and stuff was oddly green, but oh, a festive churn we got, and just on Halloween it fell that night. Our reaper lead was Rob McGreen, a clever sturdy fellow. His son got episim with child, that lived in Auchmacalla. He got hemp seed, I mind it well, and he made oddly light of it, but many a day was by himself, he was so sorely frighted that very night. Then up got fightin' Jamie Fleck, and he swore by his conscience that he could sow hemp seed a peck, for it was all but nonsense. The old goodman reached down the sack, and out a handful gave him, then bade him slip out from the folk some time when no one sees him, and try it that night. He marches through among the stacks, though he was something shaken. The muck fork he for harrow takes, and hauls it down behind him. And every now and then he says, "Hemp seed I sow thee, and her that is to be my lass, come after me and draw thee as fast this night." He whistled up Lord Lennox March to keep his courage chary. Although his hair began to arch, he was so spooked and leery, till presently he hears a squeak, and then a groan and grunting. He by his shoulder gave a peek, and tumbled with a thumping out o'er that night. He roared a horrid murder shout in dreadful desperation, and young and old came running out to hear the sad narration. He swore it was limpin' Jean Macraw or hunchback Merrin Humphrey, till stop she trotted through them all, and who was it but Grumphie astir that night. Meg to the barn would gladly have gone, to winnow trays of nothin', but for to meet the devil alone she put but little faith in. She gives the herd boy several nuts and 2 red blushing apples, to watch, while for the barn she sets, in hopes to see Tom Kipples that very night. She turns the key with gentle throw, and o'er the threshold ventures, but first on darkness gives a call, then boldly in she enters. A rodent rattled up the wall, and she cried, "Lord preserve her!" and ran through compost heap and all, and prayed with zeal and fervour, full fast that night. They urged on Will with strong advice, they promised him a fine one. It chanced the stack he fathomed thrice was timber propped for throwin'. He takes a swirly old moss oak for some black gruesome villain, and let a curse and drew a stroke till skin and shreds came trailin' off his fists that night. A wanton widow Leezy was, as cheerful as a kitten, but oh that night among the shows she got a fearful settlin'. She through the rocks and by the cairn and o'er the hill went sailin', where 3 lords' lands met at a stream, to dip her left shirt sleeve in, was bent that night. While o'er a fall the streamlet plays, as through the glen it rippled, while round a rocky scar it strays, while in an eddy dimpled, while glittered to the nightly rays with bickering dancing dazzle, while hidden underneath the rise below the spreading hazel, unseen that night. Among the brackens on the brow, between her and the moon, the devil, or else a roaming cow, got up and gave a croon. Poor Leezy's heart near left its place, near skylark height she jumped, but missed a fit, and in the pool, out o'er the ears she plumped, with a plunge that night. In order, on the clean hearthstone, the buckets 3 are ranged, and every time great care is shown to see them duly changed. Old Uncle John, whom wedlock's joys since Mars year did desire, because he got the bare pail thrice, he heaved them on the fire, in wrath that night. With merry songs and friendly cracks, I say they didn't weary, and wondrous tales and funny jokes, their sports were cheap and cheery, till buttered psalms with fragrant vent set all their gobs a-stirrin'. Then with a social glass of strunt, they parted off careerin', full of cheer that night.